So hello everybody, welcome to Kettle Kitchen. This time we're going to go ahead and do a video, and this is going to be what we would consider a beginner's video, and the reason for that is showing people from start to finish how we go through a canning process, okay? This is called Plan to Can Collaboration for 2024, and it's hosted by Jeni's Scratch Made Kitchen and the MillerLife Kitchen. Both those channels have come together to try to give beginners recipes as well as process and making sure you're hitting all the points as you go along. So what we're going to go ahead and do is I want to go through and go real quick through the information that they have provided for us. So this will go the month of February, which we're actively in now. It'll go the 1st through the 29th, which is the last day of the month. And then on March 2nd, over on Jeni's Scratch Made Kitchen, there will be a live giveaway, and they will be giving away 2 canners plus door prizes. So you might want to make sure that you're there for that. In addition, to be eligible, you need to, hopefully you're putting in your liking, sharing, and commenting. When you go through and you comment, make sure it's a heartfelt comment, something sincere, not just a copy pasted comment, because YouTube will pick up on those. Okay. If you find content that you like, consider subscribing to these channels, because every one of the channels in here are good channels, are great channels, great content, good people. So there's that spiel. On the 2nd, on Jeni's channel for the live giveaway, it'll be 5:30 Mountain Standard Time, which is 4:30 Pacific Daylight Time. I get all confused. Central Time should be 6:30, and then Eastern Time should be 7:30, I believe. You have to double check those, but I know it's Mountain Standard Time. 5:30 is when it's going to originate. So head over there and you can be involved in that. So February is National Canned Food Month. They put this together, again, like I said, to give beginners information, insight, recipes, ideas, things like that. The biggest thing I can tell you is that always do your own research, okay? Without getting into a long discussion on it, there are some people that kind of just wing it and do their own thing. There's others that follow it to a T, which is the standard. And I think that's important, and maybe we'll hit on that now. So when you're looking for how do I know what I'm doing, okay, this book, it's probably backwards, but it's the USDA Complete Guide to Home Canning. This edition that I have was revised in 2015, so that's my go-to book, okay? In addition to that, because of the way canning has evolved over the years, Ball is typically recognized as an approved process to go through. There's been some question whether that's following through or not. There's been some information put out there that they're no longer testing like they used to. So again, make sure that the recipe is safe through this book. Or you can do like I did, which my recipe, without showing you what it is, right there, you can go to the National Center for Home Food Preservation, and actually it's an acronym. It's NCHFP is where you can go, and you can get theoretically the recipes that are approved through them by utilizing this information, okay? That's not to say, like this book here, I haven't used recipes out of here, but I'm not comfortable in saying which non-USDA books or locations you can go to use. So I think you need to do your own research. That's paramount to this whole entire process, because it's going in your house or you're giving it to people. So you want to make sure you're as safe as possible, okay? That being said, there's also equipment that has to be used in this process as well. The Variations of equipment can change, and I'll get to that in just a second. But I think the overall interpretation is that there's a standard to follow. The USDA book will go through and list what all those things are. Okay. That being said, let's turn you around and then I'll show you what some of the equipment is. All right. So as we look at this, number one, I use 4 jars canning lids. 4 jars always pops. You can find a 10% discount code down below. It, to me, is a product that I can stand behind and I support. And so all of my canning is done with this product. Now, there are other brands out there. You can use Bulk, you can use Keri, you can use whatever you want. You want to make sure, though, that the product itself, lid and ring, are good products, okay? I've never had any issue with these, and so that's why I will use them all the time, okay? So you have your lids and your rings, and then you have your jars, okay? Now, again, just like with the lids and rings, you can use the brand you want to, but you want to make sure it's a good product, okay? So what I do, and I support wholeheartedly Jeni's prep a day, can a day process, because that just makes life that much easier. And you'll see as we go along, because most of my stuff's all ready to go now. So last night I washed these, soapy water, make sure they're good. As you're doing that, you want to take and you want to feel around the edge, make sure there's no chips, no cracks, no breaks. You want to physically look through the jar and make sure that you don't see any of those as well, okay? It's checking these parts, this part, okay, as well as the entire jar itself. So that's what I do. And then they get turned over and they sit there until I'm ready to heat them up, okay, which we'll get to that in a second. Then you have, now I have other things I use, but this is what I use. So I have a spoon rest canning ladle, okay? And that's because it has that hook that can rest on the side of your pot. You have your funnel. You have your jar gripper. Now I use the ones that are easy retractable, okay? Then you also have these. This is magnetic, so it will pick that up from the water that you're heating your lids and rings in, okay? So this debubbler I use because of the plastic. It's not metal or anything like that. The other thing is that there is headspace guides here, okay? So you have 1 inch, 3/4 inch, 1/2, and 1/4, okay? And the way that works, put that there. So if I'm going 1/4 inch, I'm going to go to this first inset here, and all of my product needs to be under that, okay? I personally debubble everything. I don't care whether it's a liquid. I don't care whether it's got mass in it. I don't care. It's the safety for me, okay? The other thing is this is a spatula. Now you can use this to get things around the edge if you need to. It also has a measuring on here. So it tells me I can sit this in the pot, which you'll see as we go along, to measure how much water I have in my canning pot, okay? So those are the basic items that we're going to use. You also have some others, which I will turn around and show you those ones here in just a second. All right, some people say you don't have to heat your lids and rings anymore. And for me, it's a learned process. So I still do it. I don't boil them, but they're heated in temperature, okay? That's the best way to put it. It's a simmer, keeps them warm, keeps that compound, which is here, keeps it soft so it's ready to go. Now they say you don't have to because this will work regardless. I don't take a chance with that. It's just process. Okay. So there's your lid. It's flat. There's the compound indented. You can see it. Okay. That's what you want, is something good like that. Can you reuse your rings again? Yes, the rings can be reused. These cannot in the processed way. Once they're processed, you should not use them again. They're a one-time use. But that's not to say I can't take this jar, fill it with popcorn seeds and a clean lid and use it to keep it sealed and the way it should be. Okay. I'm not going to tighten that at all because I don't want to use that lid. But that it can be used for, but not for reprocessing, canning items anymore. So there are people that do it. I wouldn't recommend it. Taking a chance at that. That's basically it. So now we can go ahead and get started into what we're doing today. So I will move over and then we'll start on that. So like I was saying, I've decided what I'm going to make. I am going to make blackberry jam. Okay. So I went ahead and looked on the website, so it's www.nchfp.com, I believe. I'll check into that and let you know. Oh, no, sorry, I just found it. It's nchfp.uga.edu. There we go. I knew that didn't sound right. Anyways, so I went ahead and found this recipe. This is a basic recipe. Most of your items, which you will have to do your research again, that are fruit, you can follow the basis of this, but you need to make sure, okay? So this specific recipe will yield 11 to 12 half pints, okay? But you can also convert that. So 12 half pints would equal 6 pints, okay? In order to make sure that you can do that, come down to here. And this is my recipe, follow half pints or pints. Well, it does pints, okay? So this should work for that. Your altitude, always confirm your altitude to make sure what range you're into, okay? And this is hot. This is not cold pack. Cold pack you cannot do with this recipe, okay? The other thing I would suggest too is reading through your recipe first, okay? What do you have to have? How much does it give you? What are other references and resources you can look at? Another one is sterilization. They say if you're going to process for longer than 10 minutes, you don't have to sterilize the jars. But in this case, because our canning time is at 10 minutes, I will sterilize the jars beforehand, which means I will put them in the canning pot, let them sterilize, and then when I'm ready to use them, they're ready to go. Okay. The other thing you have to look at is thermal shock. So I don't want, if you're doing hot items, you want hot food and you want hot equipment. I'm referring to jars so that you don't crack break the jars that you're utilizing or have any possibility of damage to your product you're making. Okay. So with that being said, let's look at what our ingredients are. So now jams are typically a very high sugar contented product, okay? But again, this is part of the prep a day. So I went ahead and got my 6 cups of berries already ready to go. I have my 8.5 cups of sugar. I have my 6 tablespoons plus a dash. That's an old trick of my powdered pectin, okay? I also may use, depending on how it looks, a little like tablespoon of butter to keep the foaming down when I get to that point, but I'm not there. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay. In addition to what I have already talked about, move this out of the way for a second. You have a canner, okay? This canner has a rack in it. okay, which will fill with water. You want to keep that at a heated temperature. You want it at a high rolling simmer, but you don't want it to boil constantly all the time prior to having your jars in there, because it will actually evaporate some of your water and whatnot, okay? Then you also have your stock pot. You always make sure it's the thick bottom. You don't want it to be thin. And then I use another pot for my lids and rings. Now, there's a couple things that have been discussed that provide some discrepancy. Oh, before I say that, I also have a towel here, and I have a towel underneath where the camera is right now. Those are to help with the process as we go, and you'll see how I use those, okay? Anyways, some people say that you don't have to, let me go ahead and get you turned around and then we'll talk. So, like I said, I also put it in the canner, but here I use a cup because you're dealing with more water. And this was quarter cup, so it's just 1 cup I'm putting in there, okay? So now I'm going to turn this on my canner because I need to get my water going so that it heats up. I have a jar in here, as you can tell, and what I'm checking is, let me get here so you guys can see what I'm doing. Sorry. Is my water somewhere in this range? It's got to be above that one. Let's find out. And we're there. We got way more than enough water. So, okay. Then I will go ahead and put on lids and rings as well, and that will be a simmer, is what that will go on as. Okay, so we'll move you over to the other side. I also always put the lid on this because that helps steam up the process faster. So as you're going through this process, you're going to want to make sure the water is going to be, I go 2 inches above the jar. That's what my standard process is. Again, we can use this tool to measure how much above the jar it is. I also try to make sure that these are set already so I don't have to fight when I'm doing my canning. So I'll lay the rings upside down and put the lid in ahead of time. So when I'm doing this process, I'm using vinegar, okay? Vinegar is another thing we hadn't talked about, but you want to make sure that it says diluted with water to 5% acidity. That's the key, because you can use vinegar or lemon juice in the product. I use this to keep the jars and lids from clouding, so I use a quarter cup in there. And then I also add some to my big pot as well, which we'll come over and do. All right, so moving forward, we're looking at our recipe, and the procedure says you need to sterilize your canning jars, prepare 2-piece canning lids according to manufacturer's directions. I'm going to go ahead and put my jars over here, so hold on just 1 second. I'm going to get you back over here. I forgot to put my other jars in. And I just take my jar grabber right there, submerge this in, just like that. And your handles on the tray will fall down, so you just have to make sure they're out of the way. Okay, so one other thing was, it says that I should get 11 to 12 half pints. I'm doing 6 for the conversion of double in a pint, which is allowed. Why do I have 7 jars? Well, inevitably, you'll either have too much in product or you'll have too little. And so I always do an additional jar just to make sure I have enough, because that can always go in the refrigerator to be made. So there we go. We've got that in there, and we'll go ahead and get that started. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started now. So it says sort, wash fully ripe berries, remove any stems or caps, crush berries. If they are very seedy, put apart, or all of them through a sieve or a food mill. Now, one thing I did not discuss with you was, what exactly do I have going on here? Okay, so one of the things you can do, and this recipe says you can as well, is you can use fresh or you can use frozen. We are out of season, okay? That being said, the next best thing to fresh is frozen, because of when it is frozen, it stays fresh, okay? So all we're going to do is we're going to take, this is a hamburger masher, been sterilized. We're going to mash these down some, okay? Now, there is a bunch of juice in here. This is juice that was created just from the 6 cups sitting overnight. It's not additional. So it's whatever came out of them at that time, okay? My family likes a more chunky jam. So there you go. That's as much as I'm going to do, okay? That being said, we now move back over to here, and I'm going to put it all in the pan, okay? Measure the crushed berries into a kettle, which we already did because this was part of the prep-a-day can-a-day. And so the 6 cups is in the kettle. It says add pectin and stir well. So that's what we're going to do. Now, you may notice that it clumps up. Sometimes people will add a little bit of the sugar to this mix just to get the pectin to mix better. With this, I never have an issue. So I just go ahead and add it. And just so you know, this is the standard recipe I use all the time for blackberry jam, okay? I don't deviate usually on the blackberry. Now, there are some that I will make a mix or a blend as long as the book says that it's okay. But as you can tell, it's pretty much mixed up, okay? All right, so as you can tell, very short amount of time, this has already started bubbling, okay? So we're just going to keep on going through. And as I'm working through it, I'm also mashing it down some, but I'm not overly mashing. Okay. So depending on what you're making and what kind of fruit you're using, This process can be quick, but it can be short. I mean, here we are, and I'm already bubbling again, okay? You have to be careful with this. This stuff is like hot lava when it's cooking, okay? So you don't want to burn yourself. It smells wonderful in here. Now, another thing you can do if you want to break those down even more, you can use an immersion blender, food processor blender, but you got to watch the air when you do the blenders and the food processor because they will incorporate a lot of air and you're not looking for that. So you have to be careful about that. Okay, so remember we were talking about boil or bubbles that you can't stir down. That's where this is. As I stir it, the bubbles are not they're not going away. It's still continuously boiling. So at this point, we need to add the sugar and continue stirring until we get a full rolling boil. So here it goes, all at one time. And you stir it in and mix it up. Again, this looks like a lot. It's part of this process. You can find recipes that are low sugar, less sugar. Some substitutes can be used, but you have to do your own research again. And very quickly, it's mixed in. Okay, you want to make sure you get all your lumps out. And it's a continuous stir until you get a returned boil. Okay. So as you're doing this, this is where to me it seems like it takes the longest, really, because you got to wait for it to come back up to a boil. But the importance is the continuous stirring. You do not want to stop stirring because you will notice it starts to have a tendency to want to stick to the bottom. Okay. So as we go along, we're making sure we get the sides and the edges. And you're pulling that all together. I think I'm going to hold off on the butter because I'm not seeing a lot of foaming. Again, like I said, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But it is getting heated back up. I can see that, and it's steaming, so you know that that's where it's at. I'm starting to see some bubbling happen. Can feel it's loosening up in the sense of it doesn't feel like a lot of granulated sugar in the bottom of a bowl kind of feel. So that means it's heating through and it's mixed up and dissolved. So now we'll get to the point where it will be boiling. Now the rolling boil we were talking about, at this point you will see probably better than you did before. So as you can see, it's boiling, and as I stir it, is it stopping? And no, it's not. Okay. So you will notice that this liquid in here will start to grow because it's heating up, it's expanding. Okay. So rolling boil, you want to go 1 minute, set your timer, stir constantly. Until that timer goes off. When that does go off, then you want to remove it from the heat. So that's what you got to remember. and it splatters a lot. So just keep stirring as you can. You can tell it's grown since we started this. All right, we've reached the 1 minute, so we're going to turn our timer off, going to turn the heat off, and we're going to remove it. So I'm just moving it over to a trivet I have over here, and I will get you turned around to where you can see that. So there you go. That's what it looks like, guys. That turned out really good. It's got the right liquid. It's got the right whole berries in it still. This is going to be good. Okay. All right. So I need to move some things over here and get started so we can start the canning process. Make sure my water's where it needs to be. And then we'll be right back. Alrighty. So now we're getting ready to can. So I have to pull jars out of the canner, drain the water, and get these ready to be loaded. Okay, so what I do is I'll turn my jars to where the threads start because I can read where my 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch is. But I'll show you how that works here in just a second because I'm going to show you the right way to do it. So, all right. So we got our funnel. We're going to load this jar first. Okay, and the head space on this is 1/4 inch. Okay, and then you move over to the next jar and repeat the process. Okay, so I'm using a cloth that I only use for canning. You can also use napkins, paper towels, whichever, but you always want to remember you want to wipe the rim so you clean anything off of it, especially when you're doing jams and jellies because of the sticky that it has. It'll stop the compound from adhering to the glass. So I'm using vinegar, and when I do that, I then switch the side I'm using, and so I don't have any more of what I just wiped on there. And that's in your threads as well. And you just repeat that with all of them. I do it as well to the point that I don't see any more coming through, and then I move on to the next one. Okay. So this is what I was telling you about earlier, 1/4 inch is right here, or no, right here, wrong end. So I'm making sure that it comes up to that, and if it doesn't, then you have to add more. Okay, so checking it again, it touches right at the bottom, so that's good. That one's a little low. And then this one is right there as well. So that's what you're doing. As I said, I always debubble, and this is a thicker, even though it's a lot of liquid, it's still thick. And that way you're getting rid of any bubbles so that there's no plugged locations for your bacteria to grow. Okay. And I'll run over these one more time just to make sure there's nothing on the top. Okay. Grab your lid and your ring, put them down, tighten them, and it's fingertip tight. So what does that mean? Well, once my fingers stop moving it, or start moving it, not stop, but the ring stops moving as far as screwing down, that's fingertip tight. Okay, so those are done. So now we put those in and we get out more jars to start the process over. So as you get more to know how the process works, as I was saying earlier, you will learn. I don't know if I can show you if this is too hot or not. We'll see. These represent theoretically a 1/4 inch headspace, 1/2 inch, 3/4, and then right there is your 1 inch. Now, some people have chosen not to go by those, and that's fine. And some do. So it's kind of preference choice. You just have to be careful that you're getting it where it needs to be. Okay, so as I said, sometimes you get what you want out of these and sometimes you don't. This would be one of those times I'm not going to get what I wanted out of it, because as I said, it should have given me almost 6. Well, it's given me the 5, but it has given me barely over that. So, because I'm at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and switch that out and try to get as much as I can. And this will just stick in our refrigerator. All right. So that's what we ended up with, and it's drained out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same routine we've done with the others. Going to wipe those off. Now, see, I knew I had a mess there, so. Okay. And check the headspace. Yep, there we go. So, got to debubble. Okay, so here's a perfect example of sometimes you have to double check these, and I'll show you why. So after I've done that, that is, as you can tell, whoops, more than it should be. So now I have to take some out. And I should have had a spoon ready, but I didn't think about that part. So then I just take a little bit out, double check it. See, now it's right where it needs to be. So that's good. Okay. So now we will go ahead and put the lid on. So when you go to do your processing time, I think you shouldn't do any less than 4 jars at a time. And it's the same whether it's 4, 8, 10, 12, doesn't matter. Okay. So we're going to get these in. And we'll get them started. So once this last one's in there, I'll come right back. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. They're in. I'm going to put the lid on. And according to my recipe, I have to put these on for 10 minutes, but that's not at a rolling boil yet. So once that becomes rolling boil, I then will start my timer. All right, so as you can see, it's boiling, I should say, sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 10 minutes. And then we wait until that time's up. All right, so our time is done. We're going to turn our timer off. Turn the heat off. And then we're going to set the timer for 5 more minutes. And that is for the pressurization to take effect. And then we just wait. Okay, it's done now, so we're going to go ahead and take the lid off. Make sure you turn the lid away from you. And let's see what we got. So you pull them out. There you go. That's what it looks like. So you pull these out. When you pull them out, don't tip them to get the water off. A lot of people do that. That stops the process or can harm the process. And they're already popping, so that's a good sign. As you can see inside here, there's nothing floating around. So theoretically, these sealed the way that they should have. We'll find out. They have to sit for, I'm going to come over here for you. See? They have to sit for 12 to 24 hours so that they totally do their process. And I'm trying to say, I think, yeah, that's the one that's sealed right there. It's already sealed. So anyways, oh, there goes another one. Remember, 4 jars lids always pop. Check out all the videos, check out all the channels. There'll be description, or in the description box will be a list of all those channels that are involved. And I want to thank the MillerLife Kitchen and Jeni Scratchmade Kitchen for inviting us. I hope this helped somebody. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I'll try to answer them. Good luck, guys. And it's not as hard as it looks. Seems to be involved, but you can get through it. So we'll talk to you later and see you on the next one.